is going to dwell on the broad theme of state and security, and we have three speakers here. And I'm going to be reading out the title of their presentation, so if you want to look into the biographical details, so you can look into the abstract and the conference brochure, into their biographical notes. So for the first speaker, and before we begin, I'm just going to tell you about the rules of the engagement. So you're going to be speaking for 20 minutes each. And after this one, once you all are done with the presentation, so we will have another 20 minutes for question and answer session. So that's the rules of the engagement. So for the first speaker of the first panel, we have Subramanian Chandrasekhar, and he's going to be speaking on Tibet in India's security architecture. And you have 20 minutes. So, yeah. Mr. Chandrasekhar, please.
Good morning and warm greetings. Before I begin, I would like to pay my sincere respects to His Holiness. Distinguished audience, my fellow panelist, distinguished chair, and I also gratefully acknowledge the presence of Dr. Tenzin Lekshe, who's been the spokesperson for Central Tibetan Administration. And also, I feel privileged to be here today. Thanks for this opportunity, for the organizers, and especially my dear friend Dorji, who has been single-handedly, coordinating all the efforts, ensuring that we come here. Thanks for making this possible. So, my today's presentation is going to be on why does Tibet matter, and how whatever happens in Tibet will have its implications in India's security architecture. This is going to be my presentation all about. So now let me just quickly get into my presentation. So just to give a context of geography, India shares close to around 3,488 kilometer of border with Chinese occupied Tibet. And all the actions of China on Tibet has been, since the times of Mao, what it has been called as the right palm and five finger strategy, where China considers Tibet to be the palm. And the five fingers are the Ladakh, Nepal, Sikkim, Bhutan, and the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh. So this sets the context to understand what has been the Chinese actions and why it considers Tibet to be extremely important, and how it is going to have its implications on India. And based on this right palm and five finger strategy, China uses these military transgressions, encroachments, as strategically designed to suit its perceptions and shape the narratives. And this is also used as a pretext for China's expansionist designs in the Indian subcontinent. And of course, to use this to lay its claim over the Tibet and its neighboring countries like Bhutan and Nepal. Especially what happened is, once after the Chinese taking over of Tibet, especially under Xi Jinping, the People's Liberation Army has upgraded its high-tech weapons and have conducted a series of live-fire military exercises along the Himalayan borders and especially in Tibet. And especially after Xi Jinping took over, there has been one significant achievement. What happened was he reorganized the PLA to make it into 5 theatre commands. And this theatre command, this you can see the picture here demonstrates the 5 theatre commands which are currently operational in China. And of course today the Tibet region is manned by, totally taken over by the PLA ground forces. But just to set the context, what happened was the Western Theatre Command was basically formed by merging the regions of Lanzhou and Chengdu. And in 2016, interestingly, what happened was for the TMD, which is the Tibet Military District, was given a special and accorded higher status. So the implications of according such higher status to Tibet, it means is that it gives more of an operational maneuverability for the PLA to conduct its operations and use this as a pretext to do the regular incursions against the neighboring countries, especially India. So as I already mentioned today, the Tibet Military District, the TMD, is directly controlled by the ground forces. But if you look at the time period somewhere between 1952 to 1968, The TMD was organized, it was basically formed as a second layer of defense, a second level border defense, military regions under the PLA. It basically formed the 18th Corps of the PLA. And then later in 1968, it was merged under the Changzhou military region. And as you all know, the Xinjiang, which is the western region, and the TMD, it regularly operates military operations against Indian military and the Himalayan regions, especially the Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. This is important because right now the current status is the TMD, the Tibet Military District, is mostly deployed in the eastern sector on the Indo-Tibetan boundary, which shares borders with the Indian states of Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, where many cases of Chinese incursions have been reported. And according to one data, there has been 494 military incursions against the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. The time period is between 2015 to 2019. And another data also states between the same period 2015 to 2019, if you take into account the entire boundary between India and Tibet, there has been a staggering 2,269 cases of incursions. So this is interesting. And this is a very important speech by Xi Jinping, because for you to understand, you have to understand the leader and the thought process. So this can be deciphered by statements and speeches. So if you little bit go back and look at the speech made by Xi Jinping on February 1, 2016, where Xi Jinping has urged all the theatre commands to strengthen, he has especially said strengthen routine combat readiness and military action. So if a little bit go deep into it and decipher, what he actually tries to say is that the Tibetan military region, the TMD, should always be in a state of high alert. So it should be in a position to be the first line of defenders and responders to whatever happens there. So this also shows the level of importance that Xi Jinping attaches to Tibet. Somewhere if you go through the documents, it will give you an impression, it will tend to tell you that somewhere there is an understanding in China today that Xinjiang region is largely has come under control. But Tibet is one region where they still face some kind of insecurity or the other. So which is why the highest amount of importance is accorded to Tibet. So since then, there have been a lot of different level intensive military exercises that have been happening, and joint level military exercises are also happening. And most importantly, the different theatre commands, they come together to conduct joint military exercises. This is very, very important, because once when you press into the different theatre commands, you also look at the logistics supply line, because especially in terms of tensions or hypothetically speaking in cases of war, the logistics supply line is extremely important, because that gives a well-greased machinery for you to fight the war in the front line. So this is important. So what does all kind of this centralization, the joint exercises, everything mean? It tends to open up, create a new line of front between the Indo-Tibetan border. And of course, the Western Theatre Command, they have been regularly conducting multiple PLA trainings, military drills, such as just to give you a brief understanding, attack drills have been happening, defense exercises, combat training, recce, which shortly they call recce, which is a reconnaissance training drill, logistical training drills, air exercises, live fire exercises, including nighttime exercises. All these have been some of the few exercises which China has been undertaking in Tibet. So this is interesting. The Eurasian Times on September 30, 2021, they reported that China has conducted around 100 drills or more, so close to the LAC, in Tibet in the first 6 months of 2021 alone. So also once after the Doklam, what happened, especially, which was where China used brutal force against India to use pre-medieval era weapons against India. Despite following a kind of negotiation strategy with India, China was quietly upgrading also its infrastructure. So this proves a double speak by China. While pressurizing India to stop building infrastructure on our side, they have been quietly, China continued to develop infrastructure. So this also again time and again proves a double speak strategy by China against India. Speaking of infrastructure building, next I would like to touch upon what has been the several kinds of infrastructures that China has been doing. So according to a latest report by Xinhua in April 3, 2022, it has stated China is planning to invest, already invested around close to 140.4 billion yuan, which is around close to 22 billion US dollars in a major infrastructure development in Tibet. Also heavy investment have given further boost to strengthen the Chinese military and security developments in the Tibet's border region. So this is definitely going to have a significant impact as well as a long-term strategic ramifications not only to India but also in the entire South Asia as a whole. So, to support this claim, there has been one specific intelligence, the Maxar Technologies. They have been time and again providing us, which is also available on Twitter. You can see they have been proved by satellite images that in dealing with India, how China has been undertaking constructing of bunkers, tents, storage units, because storage units and etc. is very important for acclimatization of the Chinese forces, because they feel somewhere, especially when India occupied the Kailash ranges. It proved to China that they feel somewhere that they are weak in terms of acclimatization of forces. So these are certain vulnerable areas where India can catch up on. So China is trying to catch up with this, especially in terms of acclimatization of its troops. So again, this proves a dualistic approach by China, which it is trying to undertake. This is a very interesting book, The Himalayan Face-Off by author Sashir Gupta, where he has brought out how PLA is engaged in road construction in the Churup village right across the Kaurik Pass in the central sector, which has placed new container housing modules along the Tunjunla, north of the contested Barahoti plains in Uttarakhand, which is just 4 kilometers from the 565 kilometer LAC in the Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. I think this is something that we should take note of and keep a close watch. So this construction of a road right across the Kaurik Pass, it directly threatens the security of India. When we little bit go back to the Doklam issue, we were speaking more about the chicken's neck, but this is also one area or one choke point, one strategic vulnerable area which we should be very careful of, because especially if you little bit go back to the 1962 clash that happened between India and China. This East Turkestan and Tibet highway, which is closer to this Kaurik Pass, was one of the most important strategic roads for the PLA military deployment during the 1962 border war with India. And as we all know, just to give you an understanding, Himachal Pradesh also shares a 260 kilometer long porous border with Tibet, which is making it very strategically important from an Indian security standpoint of view. So another interesting development, what happened was on May 29, 2021, the Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister, Jairam Thakur, along with the DG of Police, Sanjay Kundu, he visited the forward areas, and this is what he observed. So he brought out about how China has been very active in building its infra bordering India. He mentioned that China is planning to set up a surveillance network at some vantage point which is looked at the higher elevation. So it always tends to, it's like keeping an eye on your neighbor, which China has been actively doing. So 5G, just now our Indian Prime Minister launched 5G in India, but they have been very active. They have already installed, and the proven testbed is proven there. It's tested in 5 important significant Chinese cities like Shanghai, Beijing. So it's a proven capacity in China. Because once you go for 5G, it also gives you enough leverage for you to quickly deploy your troops in terms of communication, which again will affect the logistics for them to quickly move troops, replenishment, logistics, replenishment, etc. for you to soldiers who are fighting in the front line. And another interesting development is in the past decade, under the garb of poverty alleviation program, nearly 2,66,000 Tibetans, nomads and farmers have been transferred into 960 new locations near Tibet's border with India. And moreover, in Tibet, the Communist Party state has systematically connected all the major isolated border villages to highways. And as you all know, today the border villages are now brought under the centralized surveillance system network. And also, what is to be important noted is it is well connected by CCTV. And China always uses, it couples surveillance with technology. So they know each and every member what they're doing. Even before something could happen, they'll be able to preempt it. This is very important, how China has been employing and deploying technology to manage the scenario in Tibet. And most importantly, China also, all these kind of infrastructure are dual use purpose. It's like a double-edged sword. In peacetime, it serves a purpose, but also in terms of tension, it can quickly be converted into a wartime infrastructure. And all these, why do they need all this? Was to, because if you look at the tenets of Confucianism, it always time and again stresses on 2 things. One is harmony and another is stability. So I think this is also some tenet that China employs in the strategic thinking. So all this is to ensure stability and securing the Chinese notion of national unity and development, which is harmonization, which again is a cultural genocide against the unique traditions and cultures of Tibet. Once you bring it under one umbrella of harmonization, which is something not in consonance with what we want in Tibet. And in 2017, China, the Communist China, released its plan for construction of villages of moderate prosperity in border areas. So this plan ran from 2017 to 2020. So under this plan, they built border defense villages, and which strategically serve as a border watch post for the Chinese military, but also at the same time it also assists the Chinese border patrols for limiting the cross-border Tibetan migration. Using the porous border, it will stop them effectively from them not coming into India. So just to give you a statistics, China has constructed more than 628 border defense villages in Tibet's border regions, which shares borders with India, Nepal and Bhutan. And effectively, China has got now significant deep pockets within the Nepal government, the Nepal society. They have different levels of arrangements with Nepalese politicians, Nepal polity. So whomsoever comes in power, they ensure that the Chinese interests are protected, especially in stopping the Tibetans migrating to India. And this is what she had to speak. He said, under the strategy of governing Tibet, he said, to govern the country well, we must first govern the frontiers well. And to govern the frontiers well, we must first ensure the stability of Tibet, which again proves that the nervousness of China in the Tibetan region. I thought I'll just add these two because it also touches upon a little bit of Bhutan. The South China Morning Post had to say this, where the Chinese construction of village in the Pangda on the west bank of Torsa River, which is 2.5 kilometers inside the Bhutanese border. But what China has been claiming is, we are building only on our side, which is rightfully ours, which is again Chinese inclusion, what I call the territorial aggression of China uses against Bhutan. And the US Department of Defense published a report where it mentions that China built a 100-home civilian village inside the disputed territory between the Tibet Autonomous Region and Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, which is in the eastern state of LAC. And this is some recent importance which is of concern, which I thought I will flag it today apart from the paper that I'm making. Recently, 10 days ago, subtly, in a very silent way, China has renamed the name of Tibet. This is a search that I made, and if you look at all the Global Times report, it now names not as Tibet, rather it says as Xinjiang. So this is time and again another cultural aggression. Once you wipe out the name, today the former Vice Chancellor of Sikkim Minister also speaking about the politics of forgetting. So once you slowly erase out of it, you take it out of the memory. Especially when successive generations they come, when they don't know their past, it's very easy to shape the future. So this is what they had to do. All the first 4 Google search results returned from the Global Times website. This is a departure from the past and an effort to continue the cultural genocide against Tibet. And on 23rd May 2021, Beijing issued another white paper on Tibet, where it emphasized on the importance of maintaining a tight hold on the region, ensuring Chinese control over the selection of the next Dalai Lama, and emphasizing border management and development. For China, the issue of the Dalai Lama is not only a religious issue, but it also considers that to be a political issue. So now today, the PLA of China is actively recruiting Tibetans from the Tibetan Autonomous Region. They are well versed in Hindi for both interpretation and intelligence gathering jobs from the LAC. Also, Nepalis are being recruited by the PLA for interpreting and deciphering Hindi. That is also one significant intel which has been widely reported and published in Indian news media. And it is now today mandatory for every Tibetan family there to send one member to the PLA. And I would just like to flag one issue regarding the white paper. Under Xi Jinping, this is the third white paper that China published. The first one happened in 2015 and the second one happened in 2019. So again, Tibet has always been of a concern, especially under Xi Jinping. So what I call the T-square, the Tibet and Taiwan, it has always been a cause of concern for China. Quickly, on a closing note, I would like to, I think this quote by George Ginsberg and Michael Mathos, it aptly sums up what is the importance of Tibet. He says, he who holds Tibet dominates the Himalayas, he who dominates the Himalayas threatens the Indian subcontinent, and he who threatens the Indian subcontinent may very well have all of South Asia within his reach, and with it, all of Asia. So, despite having the special representative level talks, which happened, 22 rounds have happened, China has always used this as a bargaining chip to buy time, what they call the hide your strength and bide your time. They have been buying time while improving, significantly developing their capabilities on their side. I think we have still facing no kind of headway on those front. So I would like to conclude by telling that whatever happens inside Tibet is going to be a matter for not only now today Indian security environment, but also expanding the scope to tell that it will also affect Asia as well. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll be available to take on questions when the Q&A comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bala Subramanian Chandrasekhar, for this wonderful presentation. And we're going to jump right to the next speaker, who is Neha Roy Chaudhary, who's going to speak on patrolling the hidden land and exploration of the Baba Harbhajan Singh oral tradition in the Sikkim's borderland. And just before you begin your presentation, I'm just going to let you know that during your presentation, once when you're done about 15 minutes through your presentation, I'll just give you a warning and then perhaps you can wrap it up. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Thank you everyone for being here. It's really a great pleasure. A few things before I start. I don't have a deck, even though I have been advised to make one by everyone I've spoken about this with. But really, I am a first year PhD student at Ashoka, and I am working through my ideas. I'm here to really talk about them, to really have suggestions. I've been thinking about why this panel, and I think what my work is doing is also looking at the border through the borderland, the idea of the borderland, and I do think that a heavily militarized border requires a little bit of, or quite a bit of a ethnographic touch, and I really hope I'm able to provide that. Thank you. So to begin with, the paper is called Patrolling the Hidden Land, an exploration of the Baba Harbhajan Singh oral tradition. I introduce here the category of a military shrine, a definition that is still in the works really. To read out a little bit, the terminology of the shrine is set in a continuously proliferating rich corpus of definitions that come together to categorize a space that is both sacralized through ritualism and preserved for the meaning and practices it stores. In keeping with the literal meaning of a shrine as a repository, these spaces have been seen to serve and signify storage for material artifacts and venerated human remains since their inception. What is more interesting, however, is the evolution of shrines as a mediating space for encounters, for collective imagination of the temporal and the territorial, for ritual practices that pass between a multiplicity of imaginations and a complex microcosm of human and sacred relationships consecrated within it. A form of remembrance and experience thus emerges that encodes practices of people that surround the shrine and also visit it for pilgrimages, giving rise to unique and interesting practices that may be defined at best as liminal in nature. In this sense, they culturally situate devotees by creating interpersonal bonds, negotiating social status, and constructing collective identities. What I really mean here is that I am trying to look at this space then, and I'm going to kind of try to situate it in the negatives first. It is when I say military shrine, I have received a lot of responses that range from am I talking about hero stones, or whether I'm talking about war memorials, or whether I'm talking about spaces dedicated to deities within, say, military barracks in the Indian Himalayan region. The answer to all of those is no. I am looking at a shrine space that is dedicated to a specific member of the Indian military at certain points in history, and these shrines are peppered across the Himalayan region. And to situate my work, I have worked so far on one such shrine in Sikkim called the Baba Harbhajan Singh Mandir. To now talk about this shrine a little bit and to try to locate it in its oral tradition. This shrine, so I will go about this in like a a dichotomy of sorts. I will first talk about how the narrative is formed. Once one visits the shrine, there are a lot of tour guides, including those from the military, who will guide us through the inception of the shrine. It is a very linear inception which situates this soldier from the 23rd Punjab in this space, very close to the Sino-India War, and it talks about how this soldier dies, is martyred. The definition of martyrdom is very interesting here, because the soldier does not die in war, he dies right before war while exporting materials across barracks. And he's young, and interestingly, because he dies, there is a certain kind of trauma that is experienced apparently by his fellow soldiers, and therefore a space, a shrine, a memorialization of his memory. A very young Punjabi 18-year-old soldier, is situated very close, 8 kilometers to near the Nathula, and this is how the story is told once we visit this space. In my interviews with Pema Wangchuk Dorji, who is the son of the platoon commander of the 23rd Punjab, who was positioned there and from whom Baba is hailed to be, Baba Harbhajan. In my interviews with him, however, the story is much more interesting, much more complicated, as oral traditions generally are, and it is seen that this was the shrine space emerges from a series of events over time. When the 23rd Punjab was situated there, really this was a plaque that was dedicated to the soldier because of the amount of trauma that was faced by the entire platoon through his loss, and to also mark the existence of the 23rd Punjab in this space. And eventually this grows through tourism and through and because it is also closer to Nathula, which is situated in an Indian army tourist, if I may call it, space where a lot of tourists go to situate the Indian state within this space. They passed by the plaque, and with it also grew a number of donations that eventually became consolidated into a fund, and then the shrine emerged. What really excites me about this is the vitality of the oral tradition, the fact that this tradition has emerged through multiple forms of technologies and interactions with different communities in order for it to grow and flourish. And now the shrine has actually been even shifted to a bigger space, and the oral tradition grows on. I will come to that, obviously. But before that, I would like to contextualize a little bit further the shrine, and I will read from the paper for it. Yogesh Snehi's intervention on popular Sufi shrines in the Punjab borderland becomes imperative to theorize the shrine as an archive of the everyday. Snehi posits that the existing relation of the shrine complexes cannot be trapped in binaries of sacred and profane, contentious or secular, and these categories become both unhelpful and fatal to understand units of representation of collective memory, practice, and even social relations. So I use this category of the archive of the everyday to understand my shrine space as well, and to realize that that the shrine that I'm looking at, the military shrine as I call it, cannot be limited to ideas of Sanskritization, Islamization, or secularization, etc., and have to be seen as a space for mobility, as a space for, like I said, interaction, and and also the growth of a certain kind of communitas that then remembers these regions much more complexly than just the borderland. And I mean, I would like to draw from what Professor Tanka Bahadur Subha said today, that that then tourism and tourists and communities who come for pilgrimage, etc., will remember this space in much more different ways. And why is that important? That is important because I am also trying to situate this shrine as a space for the nation state, the Indian nation state, in what is a sacred geography. I mean, if I look at Sikkim then becomes an integral part of a Tibeto-Buddhist imagination of sacred geographies. It is, and that is also where I borrow my category of the hidden land. The hidden land, or the Bayul, is a category of sacred geography within parts of Tibetan Buddhism. And then, how does this oral tradition that has emerged as an interaction of the modern nation state, the Indian modern nation state, arrive and also exist in this sacred geography, in a much contested sacred geography? The Indian army is in multiple fighting multiple cases in the Supreme Court for multiple sacred spaces within this area, very much in Sikkim itself. And very close to these spaces is this shrine space, which is growing in its oral tradition, which through secondary spaces of orality like YouTube channels, creative spaces like that, is growing and is forming an imagination of the borderland at the center. And these are two categories I use very loosely and very critically, but the idea then becomes that how is the periphery becoming perceived through this oral tradition that is passed through tourism, through a global community, as well as a community that is mediated through oral tradition at the center, because the Baba Harbhajan Singh oral tradition is growing and proliferating in multiple forms. So that is one of the questions I try to ask over the course of my work. The next thing that I really want to talk about in this space is how then does the state look at itself or appear within the periphery? Because really this work, or the ethnographic work that will follow the preliminary questions I'm asking, will deal with how communities adapt such oral traditions as well. So really what I'm positing is not that the Indian nation state coerces, but that it injects itself to negotiate in multiple forms at the periphery. And one of those is through really the visual and material culture within these shrine spaces itself. From the works of people like Dipesh Chakraborty and Niladri Bhattacharya, we have seen that writing and understanding secular histories can be mired with a lot of political motivation. And for me, I think that category fits well in how the state tries to take secular forms of symbols and embed them within this space of the military shrine. The shrine could be imagined as symbolic of all Indian religions that are drawn on the on the entrance of the shrine. But really, when we look closely at the practices within the shrine, they resemble much more closely to, say, Sikh or Hindu practices of purification of water, or purification through water, repeated ritualisms, etc. What I'm trying to say here is not then that this is a Hindu or a Sikh shrine, but that multiple forms of visual cultures are being stored here, and they're taking on different kinds of they're taking on symbols that assert the state secular, the idea of the state secularism in a sacred geography that is not secular, that cannot in any which way be called secular. The term that fits much more than is liminal, because this is a dynamic space of sacrality that overlaps with each other, and somehow it is simplified through these spaces of visual and material cultures that only assert the state secularism. I am actually really almost done, but I would like to kind of go over some final comments about this space. And here I would actually like to go back to the idea of the Beul, or the fact that this space is an interesting and intersecting sacred geography, and the state in so many ways or I look at the state here in so many ways as a negotiator and a stakeholder in a borderland that is both porous and seen in the centers of India as very heavily militarized, or imagined in the centers of India as heavily militarized, as heavily guarded. But really, I am trying to use this sacred geography and this shrine to insert the state, the Indian nation state, as a collaborator with communities who have taken up this sacred geography, this oral tradition already, to make it into something else. This oral tradition has now grown for there to be space for example, a reincarnation of Baba Harbhajan Singh, who asserts himself and his identity as Nepali, and as Hindu, but is also becoming part of this community that is growing within this oral, or is growing with this oral tradition. So really, I would like to leave this at the idea that I want to look at this space as how memorialization happens through what Stuart Blackburn calls death and deification, but also how the community then takes up these kinds of, the communities that surround shrines take up these archetypes and make them something of their own, and it leads to a rich and proliferating borderland space that forms an almost different notion of the border, of the frontier, than just a line or a cartographic space that is drawn on a map. It makes it a rich and vital space for politics and identities to emerge and interact with each other, while the state remains an active participant in that, but is not entirely or definitely the only participant or the only determiner of what happens. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Sneha, for this wonderful presentation. And the last speaker of the first panel, we have Somnath Sahu, who is going to speak on China's armed forces bases in Tibet and its implication for the security of India.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. I will be speaking on China's armed forces bases in Tibet and its implication for security of India. So, as we know, we have been in a troubled relationship with China for last more than 50-60 years. We have fought one major war in 62. Now also we had some border clash in Galwan and before that in Doklam. So the main argument will be like, we think in India, like in the Tibetan region especially, we have some certain advantage over China. Right now we have, but I think by the time next 5 to 10 years down the line, China will seriously catch up, or maybe they will overtake in every aspect, whether it's military or air force. Like like China, India, we have they have more than 14 major air force bases in Tibetan region, and the proximity of those air force bases, some are near to our border and some are in depth areas. So if we as an Indian Air Force we go attack their bases, so it won't impact much to them. And then if we talk about PLA bases in Tibet, China's Western Threatened Command is looking towards Indian border. It is divided into majorly two military districts. One is Tibet Military District and other is Xinjiang Military District. China has stationed more than 2 to 2.5 lakh soldiers in that command. In a possible military confrontation with China, India has to prepare both continentally and through Air Force also. China's military capabilities have been in the process of major transformation as initially outlined during Deng Xiaoping era, but the upgradation of the PLA military profile has been going in a phased manner and it's going very rapidly. Building of military infrastructure in Tibet, like all-weather highways, infrastructure to hinterland from near prefectures and provinces, massive roads, railways, and Central Asian Tibetan border area. And this is the result of PLA's capability to swiftly deploy substantial military power against India's northern borders. And then I have mainly divided into 5 points, like logistics. As a true military power needs 4-5 major things aspects, like logistics. First of all, I'll talk about logistics. The location of the main logistics center of Tibetan military region lies in the Nagaru township, which has capacity of managing approximately 3 million tons of cargo. It is roughly 300 kilometers northeast of Lhasa, where construction of oil and gas pipeline is taking place along with the Xinjiang Tibet Railroad. Highways, airfields have dispersal terminals. It provides the logistical support for any military campaign against India near the mountain regions. Deployment ability of PLA army has improved with the infrastructure they have built to connect Lhasa with Chengdu. They have constructed a long highway of more than 2,400 kilometers with many offshoots running towards the Indian border along all the LAC. They have also constructed a rail network from Golmund to the Tibet's capital Lhasa. This rail and road infrastructure to enhance the capacity of PLA, mobilizing up to 30 regiments to the Tibet region. Currently, the Chinese have the ability to insert up to 12 divisions of troops within 1 month. This is a very rapid deployment. The troops are participating from several years, practicing and doing rehearsals from several years to control the mountains and high elevation. And they have some specialized chambers where they can acclimatize, like those new recruits who come from hinterland far away, they have to be acclimatized. So they have specific oxygenized chambers to acclimatize to the high altitude of Tibetan region. The troops are they have more than 500 small military districts, including Tibet and Xinjiang regions. And this is extreme point of heightened assault capacity they are posing, which can assault through rocket attacks to the military concentrations and nearby airstrips of Indian side military establishments. It can be observed that the Western Session Command has only 2 enhanced group armies after the rearrangement. Further, the Central Theatre Command has been arranged in such a way that strategic reserve force for the eastern coast, and this role might be also in conjunction with the Western Theatre Command. The frontline PLA troops concentration in Tibet in places like Rohtuk, Gaimuk, Drompa, Saga and Lhasa and so on. These are the very strategic and important bases for China from Chinese point of view, and the major highways roads connect to G219 highway, Western Highway, which connects to from Xinjiang to Tibet region. PLA commissioned special operation battalions in the mid 90s, and they went through rigorous parachute training in order to further specialize fighting behind enemy lines, practicing in sabotage, reconnaissance, and other unconventional operations. These include 15th Airborne Corps set up by PLA Air Force, which is proficient in undertaking strategic missions such as disabling enemy supply chains. Then I will talk about PLA armored divisions. So they have mainly three types of battle vehicles, two types of tanks, one armored personnel carrier, and now they have recently inducted new Type 15 light tank that will be easy to maneuver in the high hills mountains to counter Indian side of tanks. Like we don't have any light tanks yet. We are still developing. Like Joravar, it's in process, but I don't think so. It will be there on the field anytime soon. So the main battalion and personal carriers and Type 15 lighter in comparison, tank is lighter in comparison to PLA's main battle tank, such as Type 99 and Type 96, with about just 32-35 ton. Normally tanks, the main battle tanks of any country, which are more than 60-70 tons. Like our own indigenous tank Arjun MK1, it weighs more than 70 tons. So it will be very difficult for that tank to maneuver through Ladakh regions. So we have to develop light tanks. And the firepower capacity of that Type 15 tank is like they have 105 millimeter tank gun, which is better than their previous Type 88A tank and Type 59D tank. And it is equipped with 105 millimeter tank gun. Chinese military expert, one of the his name is Wei Dongsu. He said once, Type 15 comes with 105 millimeter main gun capable of firing armor-piercing rounds and gun-launched missiles. We have so many tanks, and as far as I know, not even a single tank have any protection system like active protection system. But Chinese have, and we are still developing it. So then the Type 15 tank is suitable for both rugged and mountainous landform of the Himalaya region. The most important feature as per the Chinese analyst argument is that the lightweight tank can outperform other Chinese tanks in combat operation in high terrains like Tibet. It has been noted by many experts. So then I'll speak about PLA ground forces, the main infantry, those who fight in the front. PLA ground forces in Tibet were equipped with modern vehicle-mounted howitzers in the early 2019, and they have vehicle-mounted rocket like PLC-181 to replace the old PL-66-150 guns, artillery guns. The new howitzer artillery field guns comes with 150 millimeter caliber cannon. These howitzer artillery guns were delivered to the Eastern Military Command in a phased manner. PLA also deployed these artillery guns during 2017 India-China standoff in Doklam. While standoff was going on, PLA also rehearsing, practicing to attack India in the Ladakh Tibet region. So this information implies that PCL-181 has high portability. However, it can likewise be moved by transport aircraft like the local-made Y-20 aircraft, transport aircraft. It can carry up to maximum 60 tons of payloads. Okay, then I will come to the infantry. In Tibet, PLA can mobilize 30 divisions of soldiers in 1 month. The PLA has capacity to dispatch a full-scale theater assault in greater sense with large-scale fight. Current given assault from its whole depth and sidelong scope and enclosure from all boundaries. The assault requirement of a capacity to move quick, accurate, dependable, knowledgeable data. They have very good network-centric capacity in that region. Like they have already installed 5G networks there. Even now they're testing 6G technology, and they have many patents on 6G. Probably China has the most patent in 6G technology compared to any other country in the world, as far as I know. So with significant long-range telecommunication system, coordinated artillery and ballistic rocket backing, and lead carrier and ambusher capable of pose a serious threat and assault on Indian side. Then PLA ground force air defense system. Like there are many advanced air defense systems around the world. Like US has THAAD and Israel has Iron Dome. But so far we cannot guarantee that the air defense systems can 100% intercept or defend all the incoming missile or any fighter planes. So like they have HQ-16 and HQ-17 surface-to-air missile system. Probably some of the version of export version they have given to Pakistan. And recently what happened, by mistake or deliberately, we don't know. We fired one missile towards Pakistan and they could not even detect it. And so finally it fell down there, but Indian government acknowledged it, and so that's why nothing went beyond escalation point. Okay. Then in the year 2007, as its modernization goals have been achieved to many extent, PLFA mechanization completed. However, the situation at the practical is ideal, with major part of the PLA currently is still occupied with some of the obsolete equipment they're fighting with. I mean, they're drilling. They have regular drills in the mountain regions. The third and about 1/3 of air defense system is modernized with more than half, including obsolete materials. While facing targets, they will soon, I think, next 5 years they will be achieving all the required targets they have set. Then, when you talk about unmanned aerial combat vehicles, UCAVs, probably China has China sells the most number of drones, including reconnaissance and combat drones across the world. And the major importer of these drones are Pakistan. China is all over friend, our all-time enemy. But compared to India, we have some imported drones from Israel, and our indigenous program is still going slow. And still, one thing, if you have observed, still we don't have strong anti-drone system in India. If they go for swarm attack, so how many drones we can defend? We'll run out of our defense interceptor capacity, right? So this is the serious thing. Like recently, last year, there was some drone attack on our airbase in J&K. We could not even defend our Air Force base. And we are talking about defending, though I am critical about Indian Air Force, but this is the reality. How are we going to defend against swarm drones? And they have heavy combat drones, long endurance drones, hail drones like high altitude long endurance drones, mail drones like medium altitude long endurance drones. And then I will talk about PLA Rocket Force, what is called People's Liberation Army Rocket Force. In 2015, China reorganized its military force, and they have restructured the 2nd Artillery into Rocket Force. China has been giving attention to development of its rocket force arsenal during the last couple of years. PLA has progressed in order to reinforce the lethality of nuclear deterrence and nuclear retaliation abilities. To increase the number of medium and long-range distance accurately, Chinese President Xi Jinping during the inauguration had claimed that the new rocket force could be a major player in bridging the national security and deterrence, a strategic support to the country's place in international power arena. The essence of the rocket force making was to improve nuclear deterrence, and the current nuclear warheads increased to a total of 280 numbers they have. We have around 130, I think. So then delivery capabilities. Addition of advanced medium-range ballistic missiles like Dongfeng 21 missiles. it is India specific deployment because experts say ki that missile has been planted at Delinga, which point all the missiles pointed towards India. And you must be knowing you can Google the range. I'm not going to detail of the range of ICBMs and short range ballistic missiles they have. Okay, then I'll talk about People's Liberation Army Air Force, which is, we think, Indian experts think ki it's not a major threat yet. We have still edge over them. But how long we can maintain that edge? I don't think so. Maybe 5 years, maximum 10 years. And our Air Force fleet is depleting. Like we have now below 30 squadron of fighter aircrafts, and including among them around 40-50% are obsolete. Like MiGs still were flying the vintage MiGs 60s technology, third generation fighter aircraft. And though we have inducted Rafale recently, but the number is very short compared to China. Like they have around more than 800 combat aircrafts. More than 800. I'm not including other auxiliary aircraft like transport, then air early warning aircrafts and air refuelers. And our Indian force lags in terms of air early warning vehicles and air refueler. Like China has their own indigenous home-built Y-20 aircraft, transport car, and they are converting rapidly to tanker air refuelers. So there is a point that every expert say ki in Tibet region, since altitude is very high, so Chinese aircrafts cannot take off with sufficient payload and weapons, like fuel and weapons. Okay, but my argument is, when they have so many air refuelers from depth areas around 800 kilometers, 600 kilometers away, they will fly towards Indian regions, and in mid-air they can refuel, and they will come with full capacity payloads. Okay, and recently I heard some expert like retired Air Marshal Anil Chopra. He said now we can generate in that Tibet theater around 300 sorties per day. Our aircrafts, whatever we have in our arsenal. China, because of this thin air, high altitude, it can only generate 100 or 150. But if they can have backup like air refuelers, they can still compete with us. Okay, then at present the main bases are like Hotan Airways in Eastern Ladakh. It has around 30 to 40 J-11, J-8 and other fighters, along with AEW and C, airborne early warning and control aircrafts and armed drones. And in Kashgar also they have 6 to 8 HCK bombers. They have more than 120 HCK bombers, and we have 0. Okay, like everybody says, bombers are no more needed in the war because we have advanced air defense system. But when you take down enemy air defense system, communication system, then there will be no more threat to your aircrafts. Then you can send your bombers, heavy bombers like US has B-1C Lancer, and Russia has Tupolev 225, I forgot the exact name. But we don't have, and we have Jaguars and Rafales, even now are the main frontline fighter planes like Sukhoi. If you remember the last air skirmish we had with Pakistan, Sukhoi is the main fighter aircraft of our Indian Air Force, but still we use them as a decoy, not the frontline combat aircraft or interceptor. So why? Because Sukhoi has more RCS compared to any other aircraft. So that's why we send Jaguars to attack deep inside Pakistan territory. So since the moderator has given me warning to finish at within 2 minutes, so I will be winding up with some few concluding remarks. China has around, as I said, planes, 13, 14 aircraft near the border, and they have deployed the stealth aircraft like J-20. And last time, our former Air Chief B.S. Dhanwar claimed that from frontal, because they have canards, it's not a truly a stealth aircraft like American F-22 or F-35. But China is not sitting idle, okay? So they are still improving, advancing their fighter planes. So maybe next 10 to 15 years, they will have comparable to the F-22s and F-35. Then we will be able to detect them. So this will be a serious problem for us. And they have now deployed almost 30 to 40 in Tibet region. And by 2027, they will have around 300 to 350 number of advanced stealth J-20 fighter aircrafts. At the end, my main argument is, like I feel, China is going for a short-scale war, maybe not now, maybe 5 years or 10 years down the line with India. They will first calculate and how far they can go. But since they are a communist regime, if they are losing men or some asset, territory, it won't bother them that much. They are not answerable truly to their citizen. But in case of us, we just lost 21 soldiers. There was outcry in India. Hey, we lost soldiers, what government is doing and all. So this is a serious problem for us. We have to be ready and vigil, and we have to keep improving our capacity to counter China. And this is not my assumption. Many experts are saying there are probability China will attack, and it will go for a short-scale war, not a full-fledged war. But they will be ready for full-scale war, and we cannot sustain a long war like 6 months, 1 year, because we don't have that much defense ecosystem, manufacturing system. But they have, and they have the money also. So here I conclude. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all the speakers.